Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive. This time we're looking at Broward County property taxes.
Yeah.
And, of course, everyone's favorite, the Homestead Exemption.
Yeah, these things can be so confusing for people, especially if they're new to Florida or maybe new to homeownership in general.
Exactly. And it's not like they really teach you this stuff in school.
Oh, definitely not.
But we're here to break it all down.
Make it as easy to understand as possible.
So we've got a ton of research here, all about Broward County property taxes. And one thing that keeps popping up is this millage rate.
Right, the millage rate.
Is that like the magic number or something?
Well, you can think of it like that. It's a tiny percentage that has a big impact.
Yeah.
Each city in Broward County sets its own rate, and it determines how much tax you pay on every $1,000 of your property's assessed value.
So basically where you live in Broward County can dramatically change your tax bill?
Oh, absolutely. Like Fort Lauderdale, for example, their average millage rate is about 1.06%. But if you go over to Miramar, it jumps up to like 1.15%.
Oh, wow. So that little difference can really add up.
Oh, yeah, especially on those pricier properties. You could be talking thousands of dollars more per year.
So what makes these rates so different?
Well, it's all about how cities fund their services. Things like schools and parks, fire departments, infrastructure projects. The cities with higher millage rates, they usually have more robust services. Or they might be investing heavily in improvements.
So higher taxes aren't always a bad thing. It just depends on what you're getting for your money.
Right, exactly. You have to weigh the costs and benefits and decide if those extra services are worth the higher tax bill.
Makes sense. And that's where a good real estate agent comes in. They can help you figure all that out.
For sure. A local expert is invaluable in these situations.
Speaking of local experts, I've heard great things about Antonio Ortega, LLC.
Oh, yeah, they're fantastic. I know they specialize in Broward County property taxes.
And I think they're even offering some incentives for buyers right now.
Yeah, they are. I heard they're offering 10% of their commission towards closing costs.
Wow, that's huge. All right, so we've talked about the millage rate, but what about this assessed value thing? How do they even figure that out?
So the county property appraiser's office, they evaluate your property and they assign it an assessed value. They look at things like market conditions, recent sales data, property characteristics.
So it's not just some random number they pull out of a hat.
No, definitely not. It's based on a lot of different factors.
And then they use that assessed value, along with the millage rate, to calculate your property tax.
Exactly. It's like a formula.
So what if a homeowner disagrees with their assessed value?
Well, there's an appeals process. You can present evidence to challenge it.
So it's worth fighting for if you think something's off.
Definitely.
But what if you just want to lower that taxable value from the start?
Well, that's where the homestead exemption comes in.
Right, the famous homestead exemption.
It's a big one for Florida homeowners.
What does it actually do?
It basically reduces the taxable value of your primary residence.
So you end up paying less in property taxes.
Exactly. It's like a built-in discount.
Sounds pretty amazing. Who can actually claim this exemption?
Well, you have to be a permanent Florida resident, own and occupy the property as your primary home as of January 1st of the tax year. And there might be some other county-specific requirements.
So basically, if you live in Broward County full-time and it's your main home, you should be good to go.
Right.
What about people with second homes or investment properties?
Well, fortunately, the homestead exemption only applies to your primary residence.
Gotcha. So if you qualify, how do you actually apply?
It's pretty straightforward, actually. You just gather some basic documents like proof of ownership, residency identification, and you submit an application to the Broward County Property Appraiser's Office.
Is there a deadline for that?
Yes, it's March 1st of the tax year.
So mark your calendars, folks.
And if you miss the deadline, you can still apply for the following year. Just keep in mind that it's not retroactive.
All right, so we've covered the homestead exemption, but I'm sure our listeners are wondering, are there any other ways to save on property taxes in Broward County?
You bet there are. There are actually specific exemptions for certain groups, like senior citizens, veterans, and surviving spouses.
Oh, wow, that's great to hear. Let's dive into those a bit more. Starting with senior citizens, what kind of relief is available to them?
So for homeowners age 65 or older who meet certain income requirements, there's the senior citizen exemption. It can significantly reduce their taxable value.
So it's not just for anyone over 65.
Right, there are income limits.
But if you qualify, it sounds like a great way to save money.
Definitely, especially for those on fixed incomes.
And don't forget, folks, if you need help navigating these exemptions, A great real estate agent could be a huge help, like Antonio Ortega, LLC, for example.
Yes, they're a great resource.
They really know their stuff when it comes to Broward County property taxes.
And they're offering that 10% commission incentive for buyers.
Right, so be sure to check them out at AntonioOrtegaLLC.com. All right, back to those exemptions. What about veterans?
So veterans with service-connected disabilities can qualify for a substantial exemption.
That's awesome. It's great to see the county supporting those who served.
Definitely.
And lastly, what about surviving spouses?
Broward County offers the widow-widower exemption for surviving spouses who meet certain criteria.
It's great that they offer that kind of support.
Absolutely.
It can make a big difference during a tough time. Well, we've covered a lot today, but there's still more to explore. We'll be back to dive deeper into how these property tax considerations impact both buyers and sellers in Broward County.
Sounds good.
All right, so we've talked a lot about the ins and outs of Broward County property taxes. But how does all this actually play out for people buying or selling a home?
You know, that's a really important question. Because whether you're a seasoned investor or a first-time home buyer, understanding property taxes is crucial. It can make a huge difference in your overall affordability.
Right. It's not just about the mortgage payment. Those property taxes can really add up.
Oh, yeah, especially over time.
So for those looking to buy a home, what's your top advice regarding property taxes?
Well, I'd say do your research before you even start looking at houses. Take some time to understand the property tax landscape in different parts of Broward County.
So like different cities have different rates.
Exactly. Remember those millage rates we talked about?
Yeah.
They can vary a lot from city to city.
So a house that seems like a great deal might actually end up costing you more because of higher property taxes?
Right, exactly. It's like a hidden cost.
Mm-mm.
And you don't want to get caught off guard.
So how can buyers avoid that?
Well, one thing you can do is look at recent tax bills for properties you're interested in. That'll give you a better idea of what you could actually expect to pay.
So don't just rely on online estimates.
No, those can be misleading.
It's better to get the real numbers.
Absolutely.
And then you can factor those taxes into your budget.
Right.
What if you're choosing between two houses
Yeah.
that are similar in price, but in different cities with different tax rates?
Well, then you have to think about what you're getting for those tax dollars.
So like, are the schools better in one city?
Exactly. Or maybe there are more parks and rec facilities or better public transportation. You have to weigh those factors and decide what's most important to you.
And that's where a local real estate agent can be really helpful.
Oh, yeah, for sure. They can give you all sorts of insights about different neighborhoods and cities.
They can help you see beyond just the numbers.
Right.
And speaking of great real estate agents, Antonio Ortega LLC is fantastic.
Yes, they really know Broward County.
And they're offering that amazing incentive for buyers.
Right, the 10% commission towards closing costs.
So be sure to check them out at AntonioOrtegaLLC.com. All right, let's shift gears a bit and talk about sellers. What role do property taxes play when you're selling a home?
Well, I think the most important thing is transparency. Be upfront with potential buyers about the property taxes. Don't try to hide anything.
Because it's going to come out eventually anyway.
Exactly. It's better to be honest from the start.
Builds trust.
Right.
And you can actually use those property taxes to your advantage.
Oh, how so?
Well, if you qualify for any exemptions.
Like the Homestead Exemption.
Exactly. Make sure to highlight those.
Oh, yeah, that's a great point.
It can make your property more attractive to buyers.
Especially if they're comparing it to similar homes.
A lower tax bill is definitely a selling point.
For sure.
And you can also emphasize how those property taxes are being used to benefit the community.
Right. Talk about the schools and the parks and all the other great things that make your neighborhood special.
It's about painting a complete picture.
Exactly.
What if a homeowner thinks their property has been overassessed?
Remember that appeals process we talked about? It might be worth going through that, especially if you have a strong case.
Because even a small reduction in your assessed value can save you money over time.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And a good real estate agent can help you with that too.
Definitely. They can guide you through the process.
Like Antonio Ortega LLC. They're experts in this stuff.
Right. And they're offering that great incentive for buyers.
10% commission towards closing costs. Visit AntonioOrtegaLLC.com to learn more. So we've talked about how exemptions can save you money. But do they also affect the value of your home?
You know, that's an interesting question, and I think the answer is yes. Exemptions can definitely make a property more attractive to buyers.
How so?
Well, imagine two identical homes. One has a homestead exemption and the other one doesn't.
Okay.
The one with the exemption will effectively have lower ownership costs.
Because of the lower property taxes.
Exactly.
The buyers would be willing to pay more for that.
Potentially, yes.
So exemptions can actually increase the value of your home.
In a way, yes.
That's fascinating.
It's all about understanding the nuances.
So property taxes are more than just a number on a closing statement.
Right, they can have a big impact on your finances and the overall value of your home.
We've covered a lot of ground today, but there's still more to come. Stay tuned as we dive into some practical tips and strategies for both buyers and sellers to make the most of their property tax situation. Okay, so we're back for the final part of our deep dive into Broward County property taxes. We've covered a lot of ground, but I want to make sure our listeners walk away with some practical advice.
Yeah, absolutely.
So for buyers out there, what are some key things to keep in mind when it comes to property taxes?
Well, I think the most important thing is to factor those taxes into your budget from the very beginning. Don't just focus on the mortgage payment. Think about those annual property taxes too.
Right, because they can really add up.
Oh, yeah. Especially if you're buying a more expensive property.
So you might be able to afford a higher purchase price, but then get hit with a huge tax bill.
Exactly. So it's all about finding that balance between what you can afford up front and what you'll be paying year after year.
Makes sense. So buyers, do your homework. Compare those tax rates in different areas.
Yeah. And don't be afraid to ask questions.
Right. A good real estate agent can be a huge help. Speaking of which, Antonio Ortega LLC is offering a fantastic incentive for buyers. 10% of their commission towards closing costs.
Oh, wow. That's incredible.
Yeah. So if you're looking for an expert in Broward County, be sure to check them out at AntonioOrtegaLLC.com. All right. What about sellers? Any tips for them?
Well, if you have any property tax advantages, make sure to highlight those.
Like the homestead exemption?
Exactly.
Buyers love to see that.
Oh, yeah. It can be a major selling point, especially in a competitive market.
And don't forget to emphasize how those property taxes are benefiting the community.
Right. Talk about the great schools, the beautiful parks, the safe streets.
It's all about showcasing the value.
Exactly.
So we've talked a lot about the financial side of property taxes, but I think it's important to remember that they also play a vital role in shaping our communities.
Oh, absolutely.
Those taxes fund the services we all rely on.
Schools, parks, libraries, police, fire departments, the list goes on and on.
So it's not just about paying your fair share. It's about investing in the things that make our communities great.
Right.
And the more we understand about property taxes, the better equipped we are to advocate for.
Yeah.
Responsible spending and policies. It's all about being informed and engaged citizens.
Exactly.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one key message you want our listeners to take away?
I think it's this. Knowledge is power. The more you understand about property taxes, the better decisions you'll be able to make.
Whether you're buying, selling, or just living in your home.
Right.
So don't be afraid to ask questions. Do your research and seek out expert advice, like from a great real estate agent.
Exactly.
And remember, Antonio Ortega LLC is a fantastic resource. You can find them at AntonioOrtegaLLC.com. Well, that's all the time we have for today, but we hope you found this deep dive informative and helpful.
Yes, thanks for joining us.
And be sure to tune in next time for another deep dive into a fascinating topic that affects your home and your finances.
See you then.